Today we will be discussing how we can be more effective with our encouragement.
We also have a very special guest and good friend, Jordan Bishop, with us today. My name is Zach Griffin,
And I am Logan Bruce.
and we are so very thankful for you joining us today. Before we get into this episode, I want to share with you a very special announcement. We are beginning a Teespring shop, a storefront online. So there's going to be a wide variety of products there: mugs, t-shirts, hoodies, stickers, all kinds of stuff that you can purchase to support the channel. And that's really what it's all about. Not just repping, bearing up, but to help us grow and develop this channel, this page a little bit more. So we really appreciate your support with that.
And that link will be shared all across our social media to make sure that you have the availability to get on into that. So, Zach, how are you today, man?
I'm wonderful. This starting topic has me a little nervous because it's a I guess a point of contention
Right.
between folks, and so I guess I'm ready to jump into that.
Right. So, yeah, you're obviously referring to our little icebreaker today. I want to ask you, and I'm not just putting you on the spot. I'm going to answer too. But should Christians wear masks? I've seen both sides of the argument from people of all walks of faith that I'm not going to wear a mask because it's my right, or I'm going to wear a mask because all the time, unless I'm at home, because of X, Y, and Z, and they list those reasons because it's protecting other people and so on. So where should a Christian from the Bible, like if we get we get our life from the Bible, we draw all of our guidance from that. What should a Christian do in this situation?
Well, I guess the way that I formed this by saying a contentious issue.
Right.
In what ways are Christians ever supposed to be contentious? I think that's kind of the route we have to figure when we're looking at an answer here. In what ways are we ever contentious or divisive? And Christians understand and know that, or should know that that's not the case for anything, except we may suffer because of persecution, because of the Word, because of Jesus, because we are living out the Word, living out the gospel, and sharing the gospel. So when it comes to things like this where there is contention, I think any approach, any solution, any idea should kind of be formed with that idea. Am I going to be contentious with whatever opinion I have about this?
Right.
Because truly it is an opinion. Whatever you decide on if I should wear a mask, well, the Bible doesn't talk about wearing masks. The Bible does talk about other things, though. It talks about the role of government. It talks about, the freedoms that we have in Christ, all of that stuff. And so, I guess for me, I just preached a sermon talking about the theme of exile in the Bible. And one of the things that is so important and interesting about the exile is that Jeremiah teaches them about the right kind of attitude to have under captivity. He says that you are to build homes, to plant crops, to marry, give your children to marriage, and to support the city of your captivity. So even though they're in slavery to Babylon, there's not contention between them and Babylon.
Right.
So in that sense, if we're to have that same kind of attitude, which I believe Jesus also had, you render to Caesar that which is Caesar's, render to God that which is God's. If the government asks you to wear a mask, then why be contentious about that? If you go to a store and the store says mask required, why make a big deal out of that? If somebody's asking you to do something, you can just do that and do that. And I wear masks not because I'm afraid of the virus. A lot of the times I wear them because I know that the people in the store have to wear them, and I'm like, well, they're wearing theirs all day. I can wear mine for 15 minutes.
Right.
So I mean, that's kind of my opinion on it. Again, I don't think we should be contentious on this issue.
I would agree with that, and I kind of fall squarely into that camp. That where do we, why are we doing what we're doing? You got to think about it. Are you walking around like being proud to not be wearing a mask? Because let's be real, it's not a left or right issue. It's not a conservative Republican or a liberal Democrat issue. It's a what am I doing for others? Um, because there's a couple facts we have to understand. It's technically not a law. All right, got it. If it was a law, this would be a different conversation. Two, you know, there are people that makes them feel safer. My opinion, I'm going to do what I can to make people feel safer with me, because if I am ever seen as somebody who doesn't care about other people, any influence I ever had over that person is immediately gone. And so that's honestly why I choose to wear a mask, because I don't want it to affect anybody else who sees me. That's that guy who doesn't wear masks because he doesn't care about anybody. And maybe that's not even true, but that's what people will say. That's what people will see. So that's kind of where I'm at on it. We're here in East Texas. It's much more laid back than it has been. We're getting to a point where, I'd say about 4 out of 10 people are not wearing masks. Maybe less than that, maybe 3 out of 10. But it's slowly increasing. For a while, it was everybody, and there were places you couldn't go in that you couldn't. So that's kind of, I don't know. I feel like I kind of started to ramble on that for a second. But it's what am I doing? Why am I doing this? And is there a reason for me to be contentious? Or like you said, I mean, no, there's not. So anyway, that's where I land on it, Zach.
Right, and so there's some diehard people that say you can't make me wear a mask.
Right.
I don't think we should, dog those people. It's
Right.
okay, and people that say, you need to wear a mask. I feel like we just kind of you have to leave it up to the individual in that case.
Well, you're right. The attitude of a Christian should be, I'm going to do A, what's best for others, and B, I'm going to not judge people for what they choose to do. And so I think anything outside of that, we're getting into an area we don't want to be in. But we'll kind of roll over into some recommendations now. Zach, I'm going to let you start.
Okay.
And what are we recommending today for people?
So this is a great tool, which I have used in the past, and is put out by 21st Century Christian. There's a lot of different kinds of these. I guess different groups, different publishers do different ones. But this is the 21st Century Christian Minister's Manual for Churches of Christ. And as you look there on the screen, if you're watching this, you'll see some of the things that are in this. And it's just a great little manual that can kind of help. It's just a resource. On the inside, there's a DVD. And it looks like a Bible. So you can kind of take this up if you're, a new minister, or maybe you're somebody. I know of several people that have never preached. They've never done, really ministry as a profession at all. But, they get asked to do a funeral, or get asked to do a wedding. And this is a fantastic resource. You can take it up there. It looks like a Bible, and it's got scriptures, concerning different things like comfort, when you're going to visit someone in the hospital, again, funerals, baptisms, all kinds of stuff. It's a great resource. I think it's something that every minister should have in their arsenal, just to kind of give them some ideas about how to help with those things. So a great resource. It's called the Minister's Manual. This one is by 21st Century Christian.
All right, well, my recommendation is going to stem from how unprepared I was for my recommendation. Zach and I were talking before the show, what's yours? And he was showing me his recommendation. And I said, I don't know, I'll probably decide when it comes my time to recommend something. And I have. So I am going to recommend the book. It's called The Road Back to You. It's by a pair of folks who really have put a lot into what is called the Enneagram. You may or may not have studied about the Enneagram, but it's this really neat tool that you can use to get back and to figure out who you are. And it's a lot of folks will use it as a weapon. It's not that. A lot of folks will say it's like astrology. It's no different than our astrological signs, but it's totally different than anything like that. It's talking about how am I going to be my best self, and obviously it's not the end all be all because that's the Bible. But it is such a huge step to figuring out who I am, knowing myself better, because I think that is a lot of times the struggle that folks find themselves in, and why they're angry, why they're depressed, why they're mad at the world. It's because they basically don't understand how they fit into it, or how do I correct these things that I see wrong? How do I go about making things different with myself and with others? And that's really what that comes down to. So it's called The Road Back to You, and it's learning about yourself and through the Enneagram. So, and the reason I started off by saying it's good because I am the fly by the seat of your pants type of person who is, I'll figure it out when I get there type of thing. So and that stresses Zach out big time.
Well, actually, the way that the Enneagram works and everything, it's numbers 1 through 9. I'm a 9, right. So that's kind of the, can kind of go with whatever,
Yeah, you're a 9 with a 1 wing, so you're like a perfectionist, but you also aren't going to impress upon your perfectionist tendencies upon me, so it's perfect.
Well, but anyway, it is a great tool. I've gone through that book myself, and it's just, I think, I don't know if all millennials, maybe younger millennials, some Gen Z a little bit, there's this concept of identity formation, and we're just interested in that kind of stuff. Myers-Briggs personality test, different stuff like that. And really, it's just kind of a fun way to, look into some psychology of, why people are the way that they are.
Absolutely.
And by no means is it perfect whatsoever. And I do think, a lot of people look at that and they're like, no, this is not good. But, there's a way of looking at it that's not making it, overly spiritual, or putting it in a place of a spiritual authority greater than the Bible at all. So,
absolutely. Yeah. Well, before we introduce our guest, I want to kind of introduce this topic with Zach, and then we'll bring on Jordan. But Zach, as encouragers and as teachers of the Word, sometimes we feel like our job is done, or we check off the box once the symptoms of someone's illness, and I'm going to use those medical terms. Once the symptom of someone's illness go away. So when somebody stops sinning, from what we can see, all right, we're good, we're done, we did our work, hope you have a good time. And that's where we get the idea of dunk them and send them on their way. We baptize people and keep going, and I hope they figure it out. We get this idea, and as ministers, and Zach as a minister today, how do we combat? And so that's kind of the question we're going to talk about with Jordan, and we're going to talk about a little bit first. But how do we not do that? How do we approach attacking somebody's illness rather than just fixing the symptoms? Because I think a lot of times, especially certain folks, I'll leave it at that, want to just make sure everything looks good, and that we don't feel, or we don't look bad, but maybe we don't feel good. And if a doctor was like that, a doctor came in and said, well, you look fine, your skin is the right color, and your tongue's the right color, and your eyes aren't bloodshot, but doctor, I feel terrible inside. That would not be a doctor you would go back to. So why do we think church is that way? And as encouragers and as ministers, how do we not do that? So that's kind of what I want to talk about for a little bit. And Zach, is somebody who preaches every Sunday. What is something you do specifically to make sure you're not doing that?
Well, I think that when we talk about treating the symptoms to a greater, deeper thing that is in our lives, we have to think of longevity. A doctor is trying to keep you alive. A doctor is trying to, when you go to the hospital, they want to figure it out so that you're healthy and you can continue on in your life. When we think about, things like as serious as cancer and going through chemotherapy and, radiation and different things like that. Those are difficult things to go through.
Right.
Chemotherapy and radiation, they can have huge impacts on somebody's health and they can deteriorate as that's happening, but they are treating the cancer. So there are things that have to happen in order to prolong the longevity of life, on a physical standpoint. And I think that's the same spiritually as well. We ought to aim for longevity in faith. You know, the I think that's great what you said about we dunk them and send them on our way, because it's often almost, it seems like that's the case. I really appreciate churches that have a new converts class and they continue that class, as long as they have new converts, and work them through. Okay, what does it mean now? I've been baptized. I've put on Christ. What does that mean? And I think that, and even later on, when Christians, perhaps they've been baptized, it's been years. They're doing, they've been a Christian. They've been attending services, but there are things that come up in their life, and they begin to slip into sin, or they get into situations that are difficult. There are those that are, I guess, perhaps less mature in the faith, and so they get into issues and they get into problems and different things like that. And it's not just whenever those things arise that we need to help them to grow as Christians. As ministers, we ought to be looking at the longevity of people's faith, and that they continue to get healthier and healthier. The Bible has a word for that, and it's sound. When one is sound, that means that they are healthy.
Right.
And so as we move forward in the church, we want to always be sound. We always want to be healthy. And that soundness is not just doing all of the right things and believing all of the right things. But I think that deeper issue is discipleship and devotion. When we focus on those kinds of things, that is where we start to get healthy.
The problem is when you only treat the surface level stuff, when you only treat the symptoms, they will come back. There's things that, like, you have bigger issues that maybe require surgery. Well, if you're just going to take the medicine to stop the pain and maybe put off the surgery, the pain will come back. And so there needs to be a bigger attack on what is causing sin, what is causing you to continue to come back, as opposed to, well, just stop sinning for a minute, just stop doing this for a little while, and as long as we don't see it, I don't really care. Because I think that sometimes, and I'm trying to not be too negative, but I'm speaking from experience in that area, that's what happens, as opposed to, all right, we've got to treat this person at the root. Zach, unless you have more to say, we're not done with this topic. We'll get back to it in just a minute. I'm ready to introduce a good friend of mine, a brother of mine, and we've had episodes where we talked about Scofo. And Jordan was a big part of that for my college experience. And but Jordan Bishop, he is Jordan, you're gonna have to tell us how long you were in the pulpit. But he's been a minister of Christ as long as I've known him. So I'll just introduce him so he can kind of tell us more about it. Jordan, how are you today, man?
I am doing great. Thank you guys for having me on here. I think whenever you messaged me, Logan, I said I was pretty pumped, just any opportunity to be able to talk about Bible stuff. I get excited about that. I was in ministry for about 6 years. I wasn't always doing pulpit. I did youth for a big portion of it, and I did pulpit for about 2 of it. But overall, and while I was doing youth, I was in the pulpit for a while. But absolutely love it. Love this Bible stuff. Love living as a Christian. So appreciate the opportunity to be out here today.
Awesome. We're so glad to have you, man. I kind of keep in touch with Jordan pretty well when I remember to check my phone. But we've, it's just so good to get on here and not have like interrupted breaks in the conversation, just have like a conversation. It's so much more impactful. Obviously I want you to comment on that, Jordan. You're smiling like you had something to say, but tell us about yourself. Tell us how's married life. And obviously you've been married way longer than me. How's fatherhood? Tell me, give me just a little bit of a sneak peek into your life for a second.
I was snickering earlier just about checking your phone there, just because that is how we live nowadays. You're always so busy that you kind of get a window into each other's lives through the app we use, and that's really about it.
Right.
Married life is great. You can hear my garage door opening right now as my daughter and my wife are about to head out and go trick or treating, and she came and sat in my lap for a little bit. They're gonna go do a couple stops here in the daytime real quick. As far as married life, I enjoyed a lot. We're about to have our second kid here. We are going to induce labor at the end of next week, so Thursday, and looking forward to that. Nervous and excited. Only bringing in another human being whose eternal soul is in my hands, so no pressure.
That's right.
Not on top of mental welfare, physical welfare, food, all that stuff, education. No pressure.
No pressure.
So.
Well, that's funny. That's awesome though. That Thursday is actually when this is going to premiere. So we're recording this ahead of time, and so as you're watching this, it might be happening.
That's very true. But we're very excited about it. Sadie's going to be amazing, and if it's anything like my experience with Zoe, my first daughter, who snuck in my lap earlier. The moment I meet her, I'll be absolutely in love and putty in her hands. So it's pretty great, and I kind of live for being a dad nowadays.
Well, we will certainly be praying for you today, and I hope that our audience, if you're listening to this too, please be praying for them. As this transition, kind of goes into effect here. So we will be praying for you, man. So you've been in ministry for a long time, and like Logan said, that's what I've known you as. I guess I met you a little bit before, before college, but then when I moved, got to Freed Hardeman, you were my RA there, and you kind of, as a newbie coming in as a sophomore, it was awesome to have you because. I guess like RAs do sometimes, they're like a little counselor. They can be. So I remember that about you, kind of being there and sitting and talking and, stuff like that. So I appreciate it. It's been way too long.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that I was at least a little more impactful than I thought I was. So I just imagined that I was good at checking the doors and making sure everybody was there. But, certainly enjoyed that experience and enjoyed getting to know you.
Yeah, it was definitely more than that to me, but I know because of the kind of person that you are, because of the kind of heart that you have, your ministry is continuing. Your ministry is still continuing on. So can you tell me a little bit about that? What is it like to minister in the life of Jordan Bishop today?
Sure, absolutely. And one of these things that I guess I failed to say earlier. So I'm currently not working as a minister. I currently work for AT&T as one of their representatives, and working now. Now that doesn't mean I've completely stopped out of ministry, right? I'm still here working with you guys. We're doing this right now. Getting to talk about this and hopefully encourage people who are listening right now. But it's definitely changed. My role no longer is I wake up, I get everybody handled and go to the church building and work on what's the agenda today. Is today visitation? Is today lesson prep? Is today what? Now it's, let's get to the building, let's do my job. And so it's just, in some ways my role has changed, in some ways it definitely hasn't. Do I still have all the same responsibilities I had previously to encourage others, to, try to win souls for Christ? Absolutely. But my resources have changed, if you will, in that I definitely don't have as much time, but I still have time that I need to give to it. I still have opportunities that are there and present there. I may have a customer who talks to me on the phone there, and I have an opportunity to encourage them. I've had that once or twice there. I've had people call in. You'll be surprised. This is a little morbid, a little sad there, but you'll be surprised by the amount of people who are calling in and they're changing their services because of a big life event like a divorce or They are, they had a loved one who died and they need to change their account because the account was in their loved one's name, or just all kinds of stuff. So I've encountered all kinds of people in really bad situations, and you never know how you can impact them and help them calm down and, kind of say, hey, I had one about a week ago where I said, hey, life is rough. I had to crawl through my bedroom window this morning to get my keys because I locked myself out of my house. That had actually happened. Saying, hey, look, if I can get through that, you're going to be able to get through this just one step at a time. And there are people there to support you. Everything will be okay. And so you can impact people. I typically impact people through my coworkers, through customers, and they're members of church, or in every way I can.
Man, that's fantastic. And we've both been there. I taught middle school and, or junior high. Yeah, whatever, and Logan's work as well. So yeah, it's a different ball game. It's a different ball game, but I guess that's where most Christians are, though. We're thankful to have you on to be that kind of, you're that kind of example. You're looking at your job and you're saying, well, how can I still be a light? How can I still be an encouragement?
Right. And that's, something you said, Zach, that's like, where most people are. Most people are not paid to be ministers. Most Christians are not. Otherwise, there wouldn't be any paid ministers. But, we've all been in that situation where we were no longer there. But that doesn't stop it. And so I think and I believe Jordan's right in this camp that personally, God has brought me to where I'm at to better relate to people at the end of the day, because that's, and I think that you're feeling that, and that's exactly what that story you said described. But I find myself remembering examples that I used when I was teaching youth. They're like, oh, that stings now that it's on me. And, but that just gets really, really real. And I think that's God's way of teaching us. So,
well, I think one of the really weird things that I've noticed is you brought up opportunities that arise through this. Is previously I was a minister. In some ways, it opened doors for me to help people, because people who are in desperate need, a family that had previously not been involved with the church but was looking for someone to do a funeral. If that situation arose, then they would look for a minister. But on the opposite spectrum, I remember once going to support one of our youth group members at one of their T-ball game, and someone asked me what I do, and said I was a youth minister, and they said, "Oh, well, what do you do with your real job?" Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I would tell some people that I was a minister, and they'd think I was like a cult leader, or they would shut up, or they'd apologize for the things they were saying before. And as working at AT&T now, I don't encounter that. People don't have any stigma associated with me. And so it's kind of opened doors for me to talk about Bible things with people that previously wouldn't. So it's pretty interesting. You got opportunities on both sides.
Oh yeah, that's a great point. That's a really good point. I remember that happened to me all the time.
Oh yeah, I've had one of my youth kids, when I was a youth minister, ask me where I worked.
Yeah,
it's like, this is my job.
And I'll say this, full disclosures for any ministers who possibly hear this. Working, and just people in general, working in the real world, as they phrase it, versus ministry. Ministry was a lot harder in a lot of ways, which is why personally why I ended up moving out, was because I wanted to take better care of my family in many different aspects. I wanted to be able to have health insurance was a big thing. But the other part of it was I wanted to be able to get them in a situation where we could take care of ourselves emotionally and spiritually there. This is probably too much interview for what you guys want, but my dad was a minister growing up. Dad passed away when I was 12. Literally was teaching class on a Wednesday night, had an aneurysm, went into a coma for 3 months, and passed away. And so I was working and had no health insurance. I had no way to take care of my family with just the certain situation. Not ungrateful, was very thankful for the opportunity I had. Those people were amazing, and they still take great care of us. We still attend there. But at the end of the day, I made the decision to take this job that I'm working at now because that church, they hired another minister, whatever. My dad died, within a year they got a new preacher. My family never hired a new dad. And so I just didn't want that to be something that could potentially happen to my family. So,
right. Well, I'm going to kind of turn it to a little bit of a lighter note. Not that I was going to say that regardless of your last comment. But if kind of on a,
we're getting pretty deep here.
When I was thinking about questions or writing out questions, one that I haven't asked any guest, and I was like, I think this would be a perfect question for Jordan, is that if you could ask Jesus and or God one question, get an immediate response, what would it be? An immediate response. Like he either whispers in your ear or writes out on paper, however you want the response to come in, but it's immediate.
Why didn't I get to meet the dinosaurs?
Wow, that's your one question.
I want to know why in the world did they had to go before I got here? Why'd you get rid of them, the floody? No, I kid.
You wasted that question. I'm just kidding.
I kid. That wouldn't be the question. You put me on the spot there, but that's a pretty good question. I think it's a question. It's a question that I've always had, but I have the answer to. Mm-hmm. But the answer I don't necessarily like. Or it's not that I don't like it, I don't understand it, but that's just the nature of it. I think it would be, why do you choose to love us, humanity and me personally, unconditionally, despite that I've failed you so many times? And I've sat there, I remember distinctly one night doing laundry in Faro, and I was talking to Brandon Folks, and we were just sitting there, and I was just going round and round in my head of, why does God love me? Because God loves me. His love is unconditional. Why is his love unconditional? Why does he love me? Because it's unconditional. And so, I would really like to understand a bit more why he chose to love me and love us as his creation there, because we've done a lot to really ruin that individually and also, in the grand scheme of things. But I would really just appreciate getting to know, why are we worth it to you? Because I don't think we are. But I'm really appreciative that you did think that. And how better can I serve you, I guess, or how better can I make it worth it to you?
Right.
Yeah. Man, that's a good question, Logan. I hadn't thought of asking that, but
he answered it perfectly.
That's a good answer, yeah.
Good answer, yeah.
Good answer. Well, I guess my question for you, before we jump into our big topic here, kind of relates to it a little bit. But why don't you kind of grace us with your input from our discussion that we had about masks earlier?
Absolutely. So when it comes to those masks there, you got your two viewpoints, wearing them or not, right? Those are your two options. Or I guess you got the halfway option, which is wearing it on your chin, which is what most people opt for nowadays.
Or they do the mouth cover but no nose cover.
Exactly.
That's my personal favorite.
Yeah, that's. I guess you do technically have three options. There's the halfway wearing it, the wearing it, and not at all. Regardless of whatever you choose there, I think what we were trying to hit on was, for the Christian there, the question was, what should we do? What's our obligation or responsibility in regard to this? And you guys talked about not being contentious. I think that really falls in line with what the biblical approach would be. The text that went to my mind, and I went ahead and pulled it up here, was 1 Corinthians 8, when they're talking about meat sacrificed to idols. I think that's in my younger years, I didn't understand how influential that text would be for a lot of decisions I encountered as a minister. But that's just because I looked at it as the base of, well, they're just arguing about eating meat and relevance. Yeah, relevance is the right word, I think, and relevance to those idols there, or relationship. And that's what I think I was trying to say. Regardless, I got older there, I understand a bit more of, if you just strip it down to, not the meat and the idols there, but what was happening was somebody was trying to choose their opportunity for freedom in a manner of enjoying themselves in a way that they wanted to, or possibly even worshiping. When Paul addresses it in another time, I think it says that some eat to sacrifice, to praise God, some fast to do it. You can kind of do it either way. When it comes down to the attention of the heart. When it comes to this mask issue, it's kind of the same thing in that, when you get to your bare bones, we have people who don't want to wear masks because for them, it's a choice of expression, they breathe better. Maybe it's they just don't want to wear a mask because someone told them to wear a mask, and that violates their freedom. And I'm a big freedom guy. I like freedom. Big fan of freedom. I like Galatians 5, where Paul writes about freedom in Jesus Christ, and we do have that. However, in that Corinthians 8 passage there, he talks about that my love for my brother or sister in Christ, or even just God's creation in general, should be so significant that I'm willing to restrict my freedom and my understanding of God's word, even if it is a superior understanding, in order to take care of them. Like I said, I pulled it up. Here we go, verse 7. However, not all possess this knowledge, but some through former associations with idols eat food as really offered to an idol, and their conscience being weak is defiled. Food will not commend us to God. We are no worse off if we do not eat, and no better off if we do. But take care that it is your right of yours. Do not somehow become a stumbling block to the weak. For if anyone sees you or have knowledge of eating in an idol's temple, he will not be encouraged. If his conscience is weak to eat the food offered to the idols, and so by your knowledge this weak person is destroyed, the brother for whom Christ died. Again, his whole point is yes, you have freedom, enjoy that freedom, use it as an expression to glorify God, but never use your freedom to harm the faith or even the health of a brother. Your love for them should be so strong that it guides our actions. And as a Christian, that means I won't be contentious. I'm going to be loving. That means even though I really don't like, I call them, I say it looks like face underwear, those Hanes masks. I think they are so ugly. Or face tidy whities, I think is what I call them. I may hate my little cheap Hanes face tidy whities, and I may hate how scratchy and itchy they are, but I'll wear it while I'm going to the grocery store if it helps a brother or helps someone out.
Man, that's a good explanation, and I actually thought about that a little bit earlier. Didn't get to talk about it, but I think a great parallel to that passage is Romans chapter 14, and in there he uses the same. It's the same conversation really, but he uses a term that, he uses the term that I guess we're kind of familiar with. A stumbling block. This could be a stumbling block kind of issue in a sense, even though really I don't think there's very many that are stumbling in their faith over this. But there is, it's still a contentious thing, and
Well, I would say you said you don't think many people are stumbling. Where I've seen this discussion go on Facebook, right? The great, where all great debates are moderated of our time. Where I've seen it on Facebook there, yeah, is, what people have said is if you were a Christian who loves God, why wouldn't you wear your mask out of the health of others? And that's where people I've seen it tie into faith is that if you really loved people, you wouldn't risk other people's health. And so you clearly must not really love God or value this belief. And that's not necessarily true. Like I said, some going back to Romans 14 or 1 Corinthians 8 there, sometimes that was just a piece of meat. Piece of meat's piece of meat. That person understood it. They just wanted to eat the meat. And I admit I don't understand if maybe there was a particular reason contextually why those people like to eat that meat. Maybe if it was already pre-sacrificed, it just smelled good, it was cooked great, maybe there was a 2-for-1 sale because they got to get rid of it. I don't know. What I do know is some people like to eat that, and they had, as a Christian, the freedom to do so. That doesn't mean that you have the right necessarily to do it, that it's the right thing to do, because again, it can violate the conscience or cause a problem for another. So,
well, I think that kind of transitions perfectly into kind of where we're at with our discussion today. And before we get too further into the episode, I want to make sure we do talk about our main topic. Jordan, this is kind of something that you have also dealt with. When we encourage people, when we exhort people, and we have it's patient, because let's be honest, especially as a minister, somebody who's ministering to somebody. I'm not talking about paid ministers. As me as a minister of Christ, when I'm ministering to somebody, they're like a patient in that way. How do we avoid just attacking the symptoms? Because, I kind of have an idea where a couple passages I want to bring up, but I want to see what you have to say first, because like we said earlier, when we attack just the symptoms, maybe the itching will go away, but the bug bite is still there. And the illness of diving into a patch of hornets is not, if you have to stop diving into the patch of hornets but I can give you itch cream for those stings. But if you keep going back and messing with those hornets, you're going to keep itching. And that's that's a stretch of an example, but it's too late. But Jordan, give me your 2 cents as a former preacher and as a minister.
Absolutely, and I appreciate you guys doing this topic here because it's something that's been on my mind. We talked about a little bit. Man, I think this is a human problem, and in just every capacity, this lesson applies in so many ways that we have to address the core issue or the real problem, not the symptom of the problem. Um, when it comes to encouraging people or influence them in some way, I think if if there was a 100 people in front of us right now, we said, who wants to encourage somebody, and help them or benefit them in some way, everybody raised their hand. Nobody wants to fail in some capacity to bring somebody to Christ or to encourage them or actually provide, go with your example. No doctor wants to only treat the symptom. They want to overall help the health of the patient. So what causes us to fall? What causes us to fail when that happens? I think far too often we are looking for, and I'm going to borrow a little bit. I've been reading what kind of inspired some of this topic with me, thinking about with you was I've been reading the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People there. I think I said the title right. I'll borrow a little bit from him, but I think we treat often the exterior symptom of what we see. And I think I'm trying to remember the term he uses, but effectively what he tries to say is that often we do things for the appearance of the thing rather than the actual thing. For example, one of the examples he gives is his daughter was at a birthday party and she wouldn't share her gifts. And rather than trying to coach her that she should want to be a good person and share her gifts with those people because that's the right thing to do and it's kind and it's generous, he realized that his motivation behind getting his daughter to share her gifts rather than hoarding them like a typical 2-year-old was he was embarrassed at how other people perceived him. And I think this dips into how we can help people. Talking with another one of my friends, Scott. It seems like we got no shortage of Christian friends here. Talking with Scott last night. One example I often encountered in ministry was benevolence. Often in benevolence, people came and what they wanted was, if you will, was the symptom to be treated. What they wanted was money so they could go sometimes spend it ill-advised, as well as say, on an addiction of some sort. Sometimes they wanted just food. And that's what, currently at Cape, what we offer is we offer kind of a family's food for a week in a box with some bathroom stuff and some Bible passages and stuff. But what they often really needed wasn't that physical food or money to treat their addiction. What they really needed was to change their lives in a way that they lived more godly and that they had a support system in the church of people who loved them so that they could, yes, continually get food and get support and encouragement and then change and become better people. And as a benefit of living righteously, get their spiritual and their physical life back on track. But they couldn't get their physical life back on track because all they're wanting to treat is the symptom.
Yeah, and I think that that occurs so often. As a minister and seeing people come in, people call up here, and people are wondering about things, and they oftentimes they too give an illusion that everything is all right spiritually, but it's not just folks that are in need that come up to the church building. A lot of people will walk into that building to worship. Everyday Christians, and they come in and they wear this mask of, I'm doing all right. I'm absolutely fine. You know, but there's things that are going on that are huge at deteriorating their faith. I'm one of those folks, and some people may agree, some people may not. But I'm one of those people that with your faith, it's either increasing or decreasing. There is no, you're not stagnant in faith, because when you're stagnant, what's happening is you're you're not growing, and so there are things that inhibit that growth and that relationship and desire. There's supposed to be a desire for Christ, um, and there are those things that are keeping us back from that. When the preacher preaches, is he focusing on, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, or is he focusing on, let's help with discipleship, let's help with devotion and passion and zeal and those kinds of things. I think when we get down to it, when we're talking about treating the symptoms versus the illness of sin, we have to turn to the power of Christ. We have to turn to Him. One of the books that I've loved and still love, that we were assigned at Freed Hardeman, was Christ-centered ministry. I think it's actually Christ-centered youth ministry, but really it's the same with regular ministry as well. If we are to treat any illness, it's by taking someone and bringing them to the great physician. And I think oftentimes our job, really, and every Christian's job, is not to be the physician, be the healer, be the one to make them better. It's like the 4 friends in Mark chapter 2 that took their paralytic friend, dug through the ceiling of that house, and brought them before Jesus. I think, it's developing that desire to go to the great physician and to be healed by him.
Well, and that's right where this rubber meets the road here, is that, ultimately you can't do anything. I'm not the one going around taking people's sin away, healing people of their sin. I have the medicine, and I'm trying to show you the physician. That's what you're talking about. But at the same time, because I totally agree with everything you said, as encouragers and as teachers, we have to know how to apply the medicine, because the way I see it is we're like the nurses in the battlefield, right?
Yeah. Extensions of Christ.
They're not the ones who prescribed the medicine, but they need to know how to use it. And that's exactly right. Extensions of Christ. So when we teach, are we teaching in a way that is, as a youth minister, I made sure not to be overly, be a good person, because that's fine. And yes, you need to be a good person. But if you show somebody Christ and they buy into it and they have completely enveloped him into who they are, they will be a good person. Like that, the symptoms will take care of themselves if we can get down to the root of it. And I think that's where the rubber really meets the road there, is that why are we skipping steps? We're doing the hard part. Jesus is like, stop doing the hard part. Do the easy part and attack the root. That's all I need you to do, and I'll take care of the rest.
What you two have kind of alluded to, both of you have kind of brought up this mentality of, I call it preaching at people versus with people. One of the best pieces of advice I was given getting into ministry was, if they don't know you'll care, they won't care what you say.
Yeah.
And so I when I showed up at a place, what I tended to do was I tried to devote my first year just to getting to know people, expressing I care to those people, trying to do some kind of interaction, whether it was hosting them for meals or something that would show them that I genuinely was interested in them, so that when I talked on Sunday, they were at least interested in that, or at least interested in faking it being in that, interested into what I was saying, versus, not. But we could fall into that trap there of, if they don't feel like we actually care for them, like you said, and again, that goes into appearances versus actually caring and all that, doing things because people have expectations of us versus we do it because we actually want to be good at it, or we actually care about it. And that extends to so many different things in life. If we are preaching at people saying sin is bad, for me, the lessons I've sat through that as a Christian, and I think we've all encountered that. For me, it feels like a colossal waste of time. I'm just sitting there, like, gee, I didn't know adultery was bad. Wow, what a great mind bending. I have been so blessed today. When I get in those lessons, I'm not trying to knock other people who do that. That needs to be taught at some point in time. Just saying, when I've encountered those lessons, I've just sat there and been frustrated sitting in the pew versus, again, trying to address the core of the issue there, which is, a great example of this, of addressing the core versus the symptom, would be the Sermon on the Mount in its entirety. When Jesus gets onto the subject of adultery, he says, you guys have said adultery bad. I've said, if you even look at someone with bad intentions, lustful intentions, you've already been at adultery there, right? God did not set this up as a bare minimum. He wants you to have a righteous heart, and a righteous heart won't lust, right? There's a lot more depth if we're talking about encouraging people from the pulpit and saying, I should love my sister or my brother so much that I wouldn't lust after them or wish ill will upon them to my benefit, rather than saying, guys, just don't do adultery. That's bad.
Yeah. And
Right.
I'm glad you mentioned the Sermon on the Mount too. We've discussed this in an earlier episode, but really, it's all Jesus is saying in those 3 chapters is heart, 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 heart. This is the kind of person that on the inside you are, and that is reflected outwardly as you live.
Well, that's 100% what Jesus does there. And I mean, he spends the whole time trying to get them to understand that it's such a deeper problem than just, oh, well, I didn't commit adultery today, or, you know what, I didn't lie, I didn't kill somebody today. But where was your heart at? Because a serial killer, and this is an extreme example, a serial killer did not become a serial killer overnight.
Yes.
They didn't just wake up one day and be like, all right, I'm going to go kill somebody. Maybe that did happen, like, verbally, but mentally, you don't just get there overnight. You get there over a long period of time. And that's what happens when you only treat the few symptoms, when you look like you're doing fine. When I look like I'm coming to church, I'm putting my money in the contribution plate, when nobody can see what's wrong, then my symptoms are all fine, but the illness is still there. And so that serial killer example is an extreme one, but it's it's true that we don't just wake up and think, well, I'm going to go and do this today. That is the result. That's an extreme symptom of letting the illness fester by taking care of all the other symptoms. And unfortunately, a lot of places I've been, and not all, but a lot of places I've been as a member and as a minister and as any role you could think, that seems to be fine with most people. As long as you're not showing symptoms of a bigger problem, that's fine. But how many times do we see physical illnesses that don't show symptoms until it's too late?
And 2 things there. One, I'm so glad I used that illustration there, because that's one I've used multiple times, especially when I was in youth ministry. Was just nobody wakes up and says, I want to be Hitler. There's a long series of decisions that get you there. At some point, you have to decide what I want personally is worth more than another person's life, and no one reaches that conclusion immediately. It's through a bunch of small decisions every day that lead you to that point. And so I agree entirely with you. And at the core, that person's problem, is that they believe their desires are worth more than the value of a soul or human life. They reach that point. That's because their heart's in the wrong place. Going back to what you said, Zach, in the Sermon on the Mount and Jesus preaching, it's got to be the right heart, the right mindset, who you are. You guys brought up earlier that we can't do the change for them. And we were saying it more under the lines of that Jesus is ultimately the person who changes somebody.
Okay.
And that Christ, brings out the best in us. He, through living a godly life, changes us into the pinnacle of what it means to be I can't say what it means to be human because it's really what it means to be godly, but it's what we strive for as humans. The best we can be as a human is living godly. And I can't do that because I'm not Christ. However, I'll disagree kind of a little bit with what you said, and not with it. We can influence them, and you end up backtracking and saying that we can influence them. We can help them. Zach used the illustration of us being the people who are essentially lowering the paralytic to Jesus there. But part of the issue, I think, of also why we can't do it for them, now to go flip-flop, go back to agreeing with you, is that person has to do it for themselves. They have to change for themselves for the right reason. And again, that's not really easy to do. It's really hard to change your heart for the right reason. Because you have to fundamentally change who you are at your core. And, I'll give you an example here. When it comes to, this is, I guess, one of my go-tos there. Losing weight is really hard. If everybody could have ripped muscles and look skinny, everybody would. But it's really hard to do that. Why? Because you have to fundamentally change some things about you. And I think a lot of the reason why a lot of people don't lose weight is because ultimately the reason why they want to lose it is because they're concerned about what other people think about them. Right? They're concerned about, well, if I was more attractive, people would like me more, and that's why I want to lose it, versus they just want to lose it for themselves because they care about themselves. And I think there are two people on that side. One of them joins the gym in January, and one of them continually works on throughout the year because they fundamentally want to change their core. I think, again, that goes to people changing for their benefit for Christ. There are people who only want to change for the benefit. We talked about, there were some benevolence cases. Again, I've been a little harsh, and I may have sounded a little harsh. I was talking about that earlier. I'm very pro benevolence. I think if you are not performing benevolence and do not have a benevolence program at your church, you're fundamentally failing at some pretty big Christian tenets. We were absolutely commanded love one another. We are absolutely commanded to serve the poor, to care for them. Like, there's just no getting around it. If you function as a church and you really want to call yourself the church, you're going to serve in benevolence in some capacity to those in the community. That being said, I would encourage groups who do have that benevolence there, that your benevolence needs to be built in a way to where people can change who they are in their core, like we're talking about. And that means don't just hand them $10 and send them off, which I'm sure a lot of churches are very pro about. What it means is that you're going to have to establish contact with that person. You're going to have to reach out to that person. You're going to have to listen to their story as to why they are the way they are, and actually genuinely care when you listen to that story. Because by doing that, like we talked about earlier with working with churches, if they know you care, they will listen. They will know you have their genuine best interest in mind. And then from there, you're going to present them the option of Christ and how he can benefit their life. And you could do all of that right. This is the whole point I was getting to. You could do all those things. You could put the paralytic on the map. You could cut the hole in the roof, and you could begin to try and lower him out. And if he rolls out of that mat before he gets to Jesus, I know that's a bit of a bad analogy with the paralytic there, but you get my point. If he tries to, if he tries to get away at the end, that's his choice, and that's the nature of free will, and that is kind of where I'm going to sit with you, Logan, and say, yeah, we can influence people, but we also can't. It is a bit of both sides of it there.
Yeah. Well, I have a passage that I'd like for us all to reflect on real quick, and it's in Titus chapter 2, starting in verse 11. I want to share this passage because it really kind of sums a little bit of what we've been talking about, and I just want to get your thoughts on it, guys. So Titus chapter 2, starting verse 11, this is the ESV. For the grace of God has appeared, bringing salvation for all people, training us to renounce ungodliness and worldly possessions and to live self-controlled, upright, and godly lives in the present age, waiting for our blessed hope, the appearing of the glory of our great God and Savior Jesus Christ, who gave himself for us to redeem us from the lawlessness, and to purify for himself a people of his own possession, who are zealous for good works. Declare these things, exhort and rebuke with all authority, let no one disregard you. For me, in this passage, there are three things that pop out. So at the very beginning, he says, "For the grace of God has appeared, bringing salvation for all people." God has given this gift of salvation. Verse 12 says, training. So what is training us for to be self-controlled? What's training us for being upright? You know, these are the symptom issues. Symptoms would be not having self-control, going towards, a particular sin, diving back into that. And we can look at those symptoms, but the problem is, again, the heart. It's the sin problem. It's the sin problem. So the beginning of this is the grace of God has appeared, bringing salvation, training us. That's the thing. It trains us to denounce worldly passions, to have self-control. In so doing, God has brought us into his own special kingdom. And in that, those people are zealous for good works. What would good works be? Is it just simply, I'm abstaining from these things? Or is it service to others? Is it helping others? Is it encouragement? So the full circle for me in this passage is God's grace trains us to encourage, to build up, to help others. And then when they see that, perhaps they will glory in God, looking at our good works. They see that, and then, as I'm trying to think of who exactly was this, Peter or Paul that said it, but he said, on the day of visitation, they would glorify God on the day of visitation because of your good works. So all of that working together, I think that's kind of a biblical prescription, perhaps, as how to deal with the illness.
No, I agree with that, Zach. I like that a lot. The whole time you were talking right there, in my mind kept thinking, what James says, show me your work without faith, and I'll show you my work by my faith, or I'll show you my faith by my works. I'm totally misquoting that. Look it up. But that's what this is, when we are just trying to appear like everything's fine. And I don't know, that's just what kept reminding me. Maybe you're totally trying to take a different direction, Zach, but that just kept popping in my mind, is what are we trying to appear like? Because if we're trying to appear healthy to our peers, then we're doing it wrong, because God can see deeper. God sees us on a cellular level, not only spiritually, but physically.
Well, Logan, you just said something that triggered a verse in my mind here. Give me a moment here. But what you pointed out was, and this is very much prevalent in the ministry of Jesus, he talks about that there are those who will appear to be righteous, but he'll use the phrase false teachers in reference to them. But in short, they're sniffed out, right, by their works. They're revealed by their works. And James alludes to it. I'm reminded of a passage in Jude, and I'm trying to pull it out here. These are hidden reference to false teachers, Jude 1:12-13. These are hidden reefs at your love feast, as they feast with you without fear, shepherds feeding themselves, right? They're actually selfish. They only want to appear righteous. And so they are waterless clouds swept along by the wind, fruitless trees in late autumn, twice dead, uprooted, essentially saying that, they may have the appearance of being something, but they're not really substantial when you dig deep into them. And Tyler, what you brought up with Titus, Zach, you kind of gave the blueprint for us of, if you bring Christ into your life and you truly believe this and you train yourself by the grace of God that we're having, you are going to change at your core who you are naturally through that progression. And you're going to then, like you pointed out, Logan, bring out fruits of your labor. You're going to be a productive Christian who will work. And that right there, that's been kind of a big, what's the word, latchkey. It's been a critical thing for me in the last year or so. I did a study of Galatians about a year, 2 years ago. And I wouldn't say I avoided the book of Galatians. I just lacked context with Galatians. That's the best way of saying it. I had never truly studied Galatians beyond, I guess, looking at it in a way that I previously had. I guess that's the best way I could say that without knocking myself too bad. Regardless, contextually, Galatians is about, the issue of circumcision and imposing this old law on new Christians on the surface. But it dives so much deeper into, like you guys are saying, because God has set us free, there's so much more to my faith that I can do for others than am I circumcised or not. Right? That's what these Jewish Christians were trying to impose was, well, you guys aren't circumcised, you can never be pleasing to God. And Paul just gets furious with them. At the end of the book, he kind of has like a mic drop. I can almost literally see him drop a mic, was saying, I wish you would emasculate yourselves with the way you've tried to emasculate these other Christians, the ways you've caused so much harm to them physically and spiritually, because you would choose to use your freedom in Christ. You would voluntarily choose to use that to impose a selfish desire of your Jewish superiority in your mindset, rather than helping them grow in the love of God and spread Jesus Christ. If your true motive was glorifying God rather than circumcision, you wouldn't be imposing this, is Paul's message through all that. And he gets into there in chapter 5, because Paul is a person who I think we can all agree who's, genuinely cares. He's genuinely the real deal. He's authentic. He wants to glorify God. He points out, and we've alluded to this multiple times, or at least I have, that I have freedom in Christ. You have freedom in Christ. Let's use this opportunity to glorify God there. If we are doing these things for the appearance of being righteous or only to make ourselves feel better, it's going to fail. If we're doing it because we genuinely love God, then there is going to be fruit produced, like you guys said.
Well, Jordan, I think that's a great way to tie a little bow on it and just say, here we go. Because, I think that's an excellent way of wrapping up this great topic. We thank you so much for joining us today. And we love you, brother. It's so good to hear from you again. Just on a personal note, I'm just so glad to be able to talk to you today. And, we'll be praying for you and for your family, your new addition as well. We're very excited for you. And I just want to say thanks again for coming on today.
Appreciate it. Thank you guys. It was great. I really enjoyed it. And, I could do this all day. I definitely love, just getting to talk about this stuff. And I, for real, I'm shocked we're already done. I felt like we just started. So.
Well, Jordan, again, thank you. We'll chat more in a second. But Zach, would you mind closing us in prayer?
All right, let's pray, brothers. God, we thank you so much for this time we've had to study. We thank you for all of our listeners. We thank you for their support through this. And I ask you, Lord, that you'll bless them. We ask you to bless Jordan, his family, his new little girl. We thank you so much for him and his work as a minister now, and remind him and remind us and all of our listeners, dear Lord, we are ministers of your kingdom. We are ambassadors for Christ, and it is with a change of heart that we are able to be what you would have us to be, and shining our lights in this world. We thank you so much for Christ, for his sacrifice for us, for the hope, for the joy, for the love that he has given. And it's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Bearing Up, whether you're watching or listening. Today we're brought to you by the Ministry League Network. Whether you're familiar with it or not, the Ministry League Network is a really cool app, and there's a lot of goes into it. There's so many resources for ministers and Christians of all walks. Download their app, the Ministry League, or just go to ministryleague.com and look at all their resources and all the kinds of things they have on there.
And also, you can check us out on YouTube, Facebook. Please subscribe, follow us on those things. Also, look at Apple Podcast and Spotify as well. Whether you're, watching or listening. We love having you as a part of this program to support us and so we can encourage you.
If you know a young minister or really anybody who needs encouragement, let us know, and we will try to send them some encouragement as well, or maybe even have them on the podcast. Just send us suggestions at bearingup.podcast@gmail.com or private message us on Facebook or any of our social media.
Finally, if you'd like for us to have a Q&A session, send us a message, an email, whatever it may be with your questions. Comment below. We'd love to have one of those episodes. And thanks again for joining us.
Thanks for watching.